Today, I'm going to talk about Cilium support for Gamma that is coming in Cilium 116. Now, what is Gamma? Gamma is a sub-project of the Gateway API. And I've done lots of videos about the Gateway API, which is a long-term successor to Ingress, and how we can essentially load balance and apply traffic management techniques to traffic as it enters your Kubernetes cluster. Gateway API is typically for north-south traffic, so traffic coming from outside your cluster, entering the cluster through a gateway, from north into south. Gamma is something that is essentially for east-west use cases. It stands for Gateway API for Mesh Management and Administration, Gamma. And the idea is to apply the same logic to Gateway API, which was to essentially have a portable standard to do ingress, but for service mesh use cases, right? So if you recall with the Gateway API, we were able to do things like path-based routing into your cluster, right? Header-based routing, redirection, modify HTTP headers, modify the response of HTTP packets, again using the gateway. Now, this was great for, again, traffic coming into your cluster, but why don't we apply the same logic for traffic within the cluster? So that's what we're going to be doing in the demo. So in previous Gateway API demos, I showed you how we have two basic things within the Gateway API. We had the gateway, which might have looked like this, essentially a gateway of the type Cilium, which is listening on port 80 or 443. And then we also had HTTP routes, which were attached to the gateway. So for example, that gateway and that route will then send traffic to the gateway's IP address /echo to the specific service, right? So it was path-based routing, again, as traffic was entering the cluster. Now we want to do similar things, but for east-west traffic. So I've deployed a pod, a client pod in my Gamma namespace, and we are going to essentially do similar things, path-based routing, but for traffic internal to the cluster. So from when the client is making a query request to echo/v1, we will send it to echo-v1, and from echo/v2 to that service. And the specification of a route is pretty similar to the one we've just seen. So again, based on traffic to /v1, send it to echo-v1, /v2, send it to echo-v2. The main difference is we're not attaching the route to a gateway, we are attaching to a service, to what we call a parent service. So when an internal pod sends traffic to this service, we will intercept it, Cilium will intercept it and send it to the envoy proxy that comes and is available on each node within the cluster, and then we'll route the traffic accordingly. So let's take a look. We'll just go ahead and deploy it, and we'll do some tests and show you how the traffic is manipulated by Cilium and Envoy. Okay, so we've deployed our routes. Now, what we're going to do is we're just going to go into our clients, and we're going to start doing some curl requests. So if I do from my client, if I do just a curl to echo/v1, my echo server will reply with its own hostname. So we can see that the reply, the request was routed to the echo-v1 service as we expect. And if I do the same thing to echo/v2, again, it will be sent to the echo-v2. So again, this is path-based routing, which was successful using a Gamma route using Cilium. And again, I've not installed any other tool or ingress or any other service mesh. All comes built in within Cilium. Now I'll explore another use case, which is load balancing. And again, the manifest is pretty straightforward, easy to read. If we send traffic to the / load balancing path, here we'll send 50% towards the echo-v1 service and another 50% to the echo-v2 service, right? So right now we're doing equal load balancing across two services. Again, the difference between previous gateway API demos is that we're not attaching this route to the gateway, we're attaching to a parent service, the echo service. So let's go ahead and apply this manifest. Here we go. And we're going to go and do, very similar tests. We're going to go and go into our client, and we're going to run some a loop, 500 tests, 500 requests, and we're just going to count. And what we can see, yeah, it's roughly 50-50 between echo-v1 and echo-v2. So there's some load balancing happening. As we expect. Now we'll just change slightly to a 90-10. So again, this is kind of a use case where you're introducing a new version of an application and you want to see how user react to the new version, right? So they could do a 1%, 5%, 10% of traffic, send it to the new application and see how users like it. So we're just going to go and change the weight. So we're using kubectl edit here, and I'm going to choose 90-10. Go, and we're going to go back into our client, and this time again we are running another loop, and let's count. Here we go. So again, we see about 90% of traffic sent to a service, and 10% sent to another one. So this is the use case you can see here. Traffic forcing 10% of the traffic roughly to go to beta or new version of our application. And there are lots of other potential use cases for Gamma. Again, this is more for east-west use cases. Things like again, HTTP path-based routing, header-based routing, load balancing, certificate termination, all these kind of things that you could do with the Gateway API from north-south, you should be able to now do for east-west, which would make traffic management in your cluster much easier. So again, this is coming out with Cilium 1.16. I hope you found this useful. Thanks very much for watching.